Hello, I'm NecroPolo. 3 months ago I released a video about Mr. Glenn Fricker. This guy is very cool because he's doing some sort of myth-busting, considering guitar and recording gear. So my first video was about audio interfaces where his opinion completely aligned with my experience as a recording engineer. By today, even entry-level audio interfaces are capable of good recording. But when it comes to guitar gear, do I agree with Glenn? Let's find out. I think it's useful to divide it into 4 parts. Guitar amps or amp sims, guitar caps and speakers, the guitar as an instrument, and the guitar electronics or pickups. But as a first step, let's put the whole thing into a context. Around the dawn of the online world, as we know today, before Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and the sort, a lot of gear-specific forums existed. You know, places where people exchange their knowledge about guitar gear, where, despite the best intentions, the only way to describe a certain guitar tone or guitar gear was written words. Things like tone wood, tube tone, warm sound or open sound, tone is in the hands, ice picky sound of solid-state amps, woody tone, and things like that. And people started to use these terms as a sort of reference to something, but these terms have no clear definitions at all, besides some subjective opinions and examples. So if you ask 10 guys to show what, for example, a woody tone is, they will show you 10 different sounds. After a while, when people bogged quite much into these terms and trying to find out what means what, they went through a sort of gear acquisition syndrome, guess, spending an unreasonable amount of money on gear. And for sure, among guitarists, there is a lot of uppity as people. You know, I spend more, I'm more right, sort of guys. Gearsnobs, in short. They are usually loud, down-looking, and sound like shit, especially on stage. Because guitar playing means, I don't know, 90% of guitar and 10% of playing for them. I can recall one certain guy when we played abroad, a boss of some software developer company. We played on the same venue. When we were introduced, I said hello. Instead of saying hello, he said something like, "I have 50 guitars. American made only the cheapest is $4,000. I use only very rare elite amplifiers, very expensive stomboxes, only the best." I said, "Wow, dude, you want to sell me something, or what?" Well, we didn't become friends, so to say. So right before we went on stage, this guy came to me and said, "Aren't you ashamed of going on stage to play for these people with this cheap Squire?" And he was serious, bloody serious. I said, "Wow, no, I'm going to play the shit out of this guitar, but aren't you ashamed of asking?" Okay, this example was a little extreme because not all these snobbish people are complete assholes, but because in general they are loud, they look down on everyone, their knowledge is infinite, and because they preach such dogmas that have no objective measurement and no real definition, they can mislead simple guys who just want to know, for example, what should be my first guitar, what amplifiers should I get if I can afford just one, and so on and so forth. And they get an advice like, "Don't make the mistake to spend less than $4,000 on a guitar. Money don't lie. Only the expensive gear is good. Don't buy cheap instruments, because if you do, you are not a human being. If you buy a cheap guitar or cheap gear, then every single time, an innocent white bunny dies. With a cheap Squire, you are just not eligible to go on stage in front of people. It's a shame." Well, I can still recall the face. Okay, not everyone is an asshole preaching these things, but elitists cannot give a good advice for simple matters. So back to Glenn. Let's go from the end of the signal chain. According to Glenn Fricker, the most important component of your guitar tone is your guitar speaker. Easy and short, Yes, I'm not too good at math, but either me as a recording guy for 2 decades, maybe, or me as a guitar player for maybe 3 decades, must agree. Okay, next one, amplifier. I would divide it into 2 parts. One, from recording point of view, most high-gain amplifiers that people use for metal sound somewhat similar when driven hard. I sort of agree because the range of sounds that work good in the mix is not very wide, so you end up dialing in similar tones for similar styles. So even though you can find amplifiers that are just much more versatile than your typical metal amp, like using Kettner Triamp or Mesa Road King, the functional difference that a 5150 recto or an angle Powerball make is maybe less than you would think. And the second thing, tubes don't matter. From recording point of view, the difference is very, very small. As of 2024, my only tube amplifier around is a Marshall GCM 900 SLX sporting EL34 tubes, so I just can't make a test myself. So instead I would borrow a little video from Colin of CSguitars comparing 6L6 versus EL34 tubes. So only valves or tubes were changed in this video, and maybe Colin's playing. But he plays the same way, so the difference is just marginal. Okay, let's go to the next. According to Glenn, from the point of recording, guitar pickups just don't matter. Well, that's the point when I have a slight disagreement. Since the early 90s, perhaps I changed hundreds of pickups. Not only for myself, but for a lot of people around me. A good pickup can make a difference. Think of Seymour Duncan, EMG, DiMarzio, Lawrence, Fishman, and so on. The biggest part of it is practical. Cleaner, more open signal, higher output, less microphonics, better response, better dynamics, and so on and so forth. If you think about their actual tone, the EQ. Again, the difference is not massive, but is it there? I borrow a video from Mr. Keith Merrow. It's a demonstration video of the actual 2015 lineup of Seymour Duncan pickups that I have the most experience with as well. It's a pretty good test video because only the pickups are changed. So, can you hear a difference? If you can, then pickups make a difference. Is it a big one? No. Would any pickup in this test work on your metal recording? Yes. Would I recommend to exchange, for example, your stock Ibanez Quantum pickups to Seymour Duncan, Fishman, DiMarzio, EMG, and so on? Yes. Should you buy a
special edition Gibson pickup set? It has golden wires, and the bobbin is covered by anodized angel fort. Only for $4,000. Very expensive, very good.
Hell, no. Anything like that is a ripoff. And finally, guitars. Is it possible to find cheap guitars that kick the ass of expensive ones? Hell, yeah. As a guitarist, I'm all about that. All of my guitars are rather on the cheap side. I guess my most expensive one was around 700-ish euros. Most of the time, I mod my guitars, changing tuning keys, pickups, hardware, pots, you get the idea. All of them have interesting stories. I would just tell the story of one of them. I found it in a shop around 1994. It is very hard to estimate the price because of the inflation, but I think it was somewhere around 200 euros. I was a student back then, and as far as I can remember, I worked during the whole summer to be able to save enough to buy this guitar. It's a cheap Music Man Axis copy, most probably made in Korea. I say most probably because despite the fact that it was sold as new, It was a heavily modded guitar, asymmetric neck profile, black headstock, reading, black Merrow, striking good quality paint job, good machine heads, and very good setup. The only thing I didn't like were the pickups, so it became my first Seymour Duncan pickup testbed. I think it had the complete range of Seymour Duncan pickups back in time. Finally, I ended up using an Invader. And then, after 1 year or so, some stage accident happened with it. A massive light stand fell on it, breaking the neck in two. It just cleaved it off. Everything, the wood, the truss rod, everything. So I was devastated because I didn't have money for another guitar. But a buddy of mine who was fixing guitars, changing frets and stuff like that. So he said that he has a burnt Legend guitar, much like mine, where the owner wanted to apply some sort of sunburst effect, and the guitar body caught fire, but the neck is fine. So this guitar is a marriage of two widows. When I get it back and it was ready for action again, I wanted to protect the body finish from road abuse, so I applied a plastic foil that looked like wood. Soon after, with the actual band, we started to get bigger. As a strange consequence of bigger venues, aggressive live shows, and good sound made fellow guitarists in the audience think, okay, this band is with this rich asshole with the custom-made Music Man guitar. They didn't even bother checking the headstock. But the music was sort of fresh, so it even influenced some people to start playing the guitar. So I know a couple of guys who later got a Music Man Axis because of this cheap copy, influenced by that rap, metal, hip-hop, groovy stuff that we played. I didn't know about the whole thing until one of these guys sold me his Music Man Axis Sport guitar, a blue one, and it has a broken truss rod, so it was very, very cheap. So around 2009, he visited my home, and we started to talk about the good old times back in the middle of the 90s. And he was going, and man, do you remember that show back in 95? We loved it, man. Aggressive riffs, rap metal, and your custom-made Zebrawood Music Man. Oh, that sound, man. I said, okay, buddy, this is my very first actual earnable Music Man guitar that you are about to sell me. And the only reason that I buy it because you sell it for very cheap, because of this faulty neck that hopefully I can fix. The guy stared at me and said, no way, man. Why do you lie to me? I started to buy Music Man guitars because of your Music Man Axis, the custom one, the Zebrawood top. I replied, no, I'm not lying. This is the actual guitar. No, he said. This guitar is black. And your original 90s guitar had a Zebrawood top. I said, okay, show you something. This one below was the original cut from 1995. It had bubbles when I tried to apply it, so I had to remove it and cut a new foil above, and it stayed on the guitar up until 2002 when I built my parts guitar that actually has a Zebrawood top. Well, I can still remember the face. So it's sometimes it's useful to keep some junk from your past, because otherwise you won't be creditable. So, okay. Oh, and the second guy, it's a funny story because I couldn't fix this Music Man Axis Sport with the faulty neck. And guess what? The guy who bought it from me was also a fan of this old band. He said, I respect your work. I loved this band back in time, so I accepted the price, no negotiations, because it was yours. I always wanted one since I saw you guys on stage. It has such a massive sound, and by any chance, do you still have the custom one? Well, I didn't want to spoil the business, so I said something like, a lot of things changed, but it's not for sale. So, I have a lot of stories from the last 30 years, considering cheap guitars. But are they good enough? Are they stage-worthy enough? Well, all my guitar parts for the second Erdog album were recorded with this guitar. In 2018, in the metal category, the album won the National Music Awards in my country, although it was my main guitar during the following years when we opened for Judas Priest, Trivium and Mastodon. So back to Glenn. Should you feel to be ashamed if you use a cheap guitar? Can you find good ones? Can you be happy with them? I don't know. You tell me. See you somewhere in time.